You awaken to velvet. Not warmth, not light. Just velvet-thick curtains drawn over tall windows, muffling the early call to prayer outside the palace. You are not a prisoner, they say. You are a prince, but the room tells a different story. This is your cage. It gleams, yes, gold inlaid patterns on the walls, silk cushions arranged precisely, porcelain dishes of honeyed dates that no longer taste of anything. You're surrounded by luxury, but it feels like burial. The air is too still, too sterile. No laughter, no footsteps of courtiers. Just the quiet shuffle of eunuchs, eyes averted, voices clipped short like dead flower stems. Hey guys, tonight we're descending somewhere dark. You've heard of dungeons before, chains, rats, filth. But here in the heart of the Topkapi Palace, cruelty doesn't drip from ceilings. Because time ... is the first thing to disappear in the Kafes. Maybe lock the door. Let's begin tonight's descent. When royal blood ran too freely, and the practice of fratricide, the execution of royal brothers, was starting to stain the empire's image abroad. Killing your own kin had been standard. Not desirable, just necessary. Stability demanded it. Just the food tray coming twice daily, carried in by silent servants, eunuchs whose own voices were taken long ago. It sinks into your thoughts, seeps into your bones. But eventually, the lack of stimulation becomes a kind of static hum in your skull. There is no pain, but also no relief. You wonder if you're being punished. But for what? Being born? You are not beaten or bloodied. You are simply ... forgotten. And that's somehow worse. You probably wouldn't survive this not intact anyway. They just ... them away. Out of sight. Inside ornate chambers behind locked doors. Allowed to live but never to leave. For years, sometimes decades. So before we enter the shadows, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. But only if this kind of darkness is your kind of history. Maybe you're 17, your favorite color is emerald, and you still remember your mother's scent. Or maybe you're 42 now, and the memory of sky hurts your temples. And tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is. Now, turn off the lights. The Kafes, they call it. The cage. It began in whispers during the reign of Sultan Ahmed I in the early 17th century. But then, in a gesture of mercy or convenience, the sultans stopped killing their brothers. And so you find yourself here. The days are difficult to count. No clocks, no seasons. At first, you try to keep sharp. You pace, recite the Quran, play chess with yourself. Historians still debate whether this was intentional. Was the mental unraveling a strategic tool of control, or just an overlooked side effect of false mercy? There are stories passed through the walls. A prince who refused to speak for 3 years. Another who painted his face white and insisted he was already dead. You ask the guards questions through the door, simple things like, "Is my brother still alive?" But they say nothing. Or worse, they answer in riddles. One who danced in silence every morning before dawn, then wept until sunset. None of them left the cage the same. You can still see yourself. One day, you spend an hour staring at the mirror, and cannot tell if the man looking back is mocking you or asking for help. Eyes alert, brows tense. You try to write letters, but they are never answered. You hum songs you don't remember learning. Alive is a changing word, prince. No bruises. Nothing a Western chronicler would call torture. That tiny flicker? He began throwing gold coins into the Bosphorus just to watch them sink. He drowned entire harems of concubines on a whisper of betrayal. And someday, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 20, a messenger will come and tell you the Sultan is dead. Was that madness born in the Kafes, or was it always there, waiting? That was the real punishment. There's one object in the room that changes, though. A small mirror, placed beside your wash basin. At first, it comforts you. One night, you feel a breeze only once and wonder if the door was left open. You rise, cautiously, hoping for a mistake. But slowly, over months, maybe years, the reflection turns unfamiliar. Still, there are no chains. But this isn't the West. This is the Ottoman Empire, and its cruelty wears silk gloves. You start to believe the walls are listening, that the mosaics shift subtly while you sleep, that the air grows heavier the more you breathe. It's locked, but that hope? One of the Sultans, Ibrahim I, lived here too long before he was finally freed. They say he emerged emptied of reason. The walls don't speak, but they don't have to. Your mind does that now. There is a disturbing irony here. The cage was invented to stop bloodshed, but it birthed madness instead. And madness, unlike death, lingers. You lie back down. Tomorrow, the eunuchs will come again. They'll say nothing. You'll eat, you'll sleep, you'll wait, and now it's your turn. The door will creak open. But who will step out? A ruler or a ruin? The day your brother stops speaking, no one reacts. You watch him from across the room. A dim corridor divides your cages. And while you're not allowed to touch, you're allowed to see. He's sitting the same way he always does. Legs folded beneath silk robes. Face tilted just slightly toward the garden he'll never walk in. Except today, his mouth remains shut. Eyes don't blink. You whisper to him once, then twice, then louder. It's not prayer. It's locked somewhere deeper than the Kafes itself. It's a quiet vanishing act. No response. It's not a tantrum. And just like that, he's gone, still breathing, still feeding from the trays, still pacing sometimes at night. But his mind? You wonder how many more will follow him. Because there are others here. Sons, nephews, cousins of the Sultan, each imprisoned by royal blood. You know their habits, their footfalls, the strange rhythms of their mutterings. But as the years pass, those sounds change. Laughter turns to murmurs. Murmurs turn to silence. Eventually, silence turns to something worse. Singing. Not joyous singing, childlike refrains, sung again and again, like a broken reel. There's one Prince Mustafa who once recited the Muqaddimah every morning with sharp clarity. The Ottomans never gave it a name, but European observers called it caged melancholia, a kind of spiritual decay. And the cruelest part? The world above still thinks you're safe. They're not dead, the scribes wrote. They're protected. Perhaps it was this memory, this stain of violence, that birthed the cage. Better mad than murdered, some must have thought. Not entirely. You disassemble piece by piece. First goes your sense of time, then your sense of worth, then your name. Eventually, even your fears feel borrowed. But as you pace your tiny chamber, you wonder which is truly more merciful. Now, he draws animals on the walls in chalk and talks to them in Persian. He believes they whisper back. Every night, you lie on the floor, arms crossed over your chest, and pretend you're in a tomb. You imagine your body sealed in marble, eyes stitched shut, mouth sewn closed. And then you whisper, "This is peace. This is freedom." You would laugh, but your throat feels too tight. There's a reason madness became the unofficial language of the Kafes. Protected like a butterfly pinned to velvet. Historians still debate whether this was intentional. Did the empire truly want to preserve royal bloodlines, or simply silence future threats without staining its hands? You suspect the latter. There's a ritual you begin. Not one taught by clerics or courtly tutors. This one is your own invention. One night, you hear someone else whisper it back. But no one's in your room. The walls are beginning to echo. They say Sultan Mehmed III ordered the execution of 19 of his brothers in one night, an ocean of blood, drowned beneath the palace floors. Because here, in this half-light existence, you don't die. You no longer fear death. You fear freedom. A eunuch once let his gaze linger too long on one of the princes. That prince insisted they were lovers. He began writing poems, terrible, fragmented things, and reciting them aloud, hoping his beloved would hear. Days later, the eunuch was reassigned to the kitchens. The prince, in grief, refused to eat. He starved for 13 days before the palace physician intervened. The cure? They painted his room completely black. Walls, floors, even the food tray. It worked. Or at least, he stopped composing poetry. Among the many strange beliefs circulating inside the cage, one has taken root deeply, that the walls are not walls at all, that they are mirrors to the future. Some claim they've seen battles play out in the reflection of their water bowls. Others hear entire conversations from the divan chamber above, as if the stone itself carries whispers like a skin. You try it yourself. You cup the water in your palm. Wait, stare. All you see is your own face, but distorted, slightly longer, eyes sunken. Or is that someone else? A prince before you? A prince after? Still, you carry the rituals forward, the pretend burial, the whispered mantras. You stop asking the guards questions. You start answering ones they never ask. You speak in riddles. You develop small compulsions, touching the same corner of the pillow 5 times before sleeping, tracing the word sword into your palm each morning before you eat. No one taught you these habits, but they feel like survival. Ironically, in a place built to stop the cycle of fratricide, it's family that haunts you most. You remember your brother's coronation, his lips trembling as the royal seal was pressed into his hand. You remember thinking, I would never want that, but now you dream of it, not for power, not for glory, for air, because only the Sultan walks freely. Only the Sultan leaves the cage. And so, you pray not for his health, but for his downfall. Another disturbing irony. Many princes in the Kafes were instructed in Quranic ethics, Sufi philosophy, and just governance lessons designed for rulers they were never allowed to become. One prince, known only by a court nickname, the Silver-Eyed One, began writing a treatise on justice inside his cell. His calligraphy was impeccable. The scrolls were hidden beneath floor tiles. When he died, one of the eunuchs found the writings. They were illegible, pages and pages of perfect script, but every word was nonsense. To this day, scholars aren't sure if he faked it to confuse his captors, or if his mind simply gave up pretending to be sane. You wonder which fate awaits you. At night, when the moon is full, it casts bars on your floor through the lattice window. You step carefully around them. You pretend the shadows are real bars. You pretend the floor is lava. You pretend you're somewhere else. And maybe you are. Maybe the Kafes isn't a place. Maybe it's a story passed from brother to brother, stitched together from silence in silk and half-remembered screams. But you're living it now. And you're only on page 2. You wake before dawn, unsure if you ever truly slept. There are no roosters here. No call to prayer in this part of the palace. Only the mechanical whisper of slippers on polished stone eunuchs on their morning rounds. The food tray appears without sound, as always. Dried figs, a boiled egg, flatbread folded with an almost maternal neatness. Their heads are always slightly bowed, their eyes level with your feet. Their presence is seamless, like furniture that breathes. But their silence carries a strange weight, too purposeful, too trained. You've begun to suspect they choose not to speak in your presence, not because they're forbidden. You don't remember asking for figs, but they always know. They always know. The eunuchs never speak, at least not to you. You've learned that eating too quickly triggers something unexplainable, visions perhaps. A prince across the hall once collapsed into seizure after devouring a full pomegranate in under a minute. He claimed to see his own death in the seeds. Since then, everyone eats slowly, but because words would be dangerous. You eat slowly, chewing until the paste of fig coats your tongue like syrup, always slowly. The ritual of isolation, you realize, is not just about silence. It's about slowness. Everything here drags. The air, the thoughts, even time itself. Slowness becomes your tormentor. When nothing changes, even your mind begins to rebel, injecting visions, whispering false memories, creating colors where there are none. You once believed the Kafes was a temporary holding. Now you know better. This is the ritual. A monarchy designed with such delicate cruelty that it doesn't need chains. Just waiting. A gentle tapping, rhythmic, hollow, wood on stone, a spoon, a message. You trace the cracks in the tiles. You pace the length of your chamber in exact multiples of 17. You count the birds that never land on your window as iron grate, and waiting. But the result was the same. Men born for leadership stripped of agency, marinating in their own minds until what emerged could no longer be called a prince. He stopped standing, eating, even whispering. When the door finally opened for him, he screamed until he fainted, and waiting. You invent games to keep yourself from collapsing. One day, you wake to find a cat in the hallway. A real one, gray and watchful. It's curled on the stone like a question you don't know how to answer. It disappears by the next morning, but you're changed. Because if a cat can enter, no writing instruments unless supervised, no mirrors if a prince is deemed in unstable humor, no mention of the outside world without approval. The idea is to preserve a kind of neutral containment, like a library of half-broken minds, each on its own shelf. So can something else. That thought roots in you like mold. There's a new sound, too. You hear it most often at night, after the palace grows still, as if someone wanted you to read the floor. Or maybe someone already did you try to answer once, tapping your own rhythm. The sound stops, and never returns. Historians still debate whether the Kafes was truly designed as a humane replacement for execution, or whether it evolved out of political laziness and unwillingness to deal directly with inconvenient heirs. There is a forgotten story, more myth than record, of a prince who grew convinced he had turned into glass. Every movement became agony, every step a threat. The scream echoed down the marble halls for hours. No one entered the cage that day. The eunuchs began wearing soft sauce afterward. There are still rules. Even here, every chamber must have fresh linens, but the walls know otherwise. You've begun noticing patterns in the tiles. Circles within stars, stars within chains. Ottoman geometry was always precise, but this feels intentional. One prince before you, it said, began drawing entire maps from memory, claiming they were of cities that hadn't yet been built. The scribes copied them. One map showed a vast palace without doors. Another, a river shaped like a coiled serpent. No one knows where the originals are now. Some say the Sultan had them burned. Others say they were prophecies. You wonder if the silence is doing this to you, or if the silence is revealing what was always there. How it nourishes bodies while starving minds. How it preserves lineage while mutilating identity. You weren't born for cruelty, but perhaps you were born into it. There's a certain perverse poetry in how the empire feeds its own. A beautiful prison is still a prison, and the Kafes is nothing if not beautiful. The lattice screens are carved with floral motifs. Your bed is cedar-framed. You are permitted music played on the ney flute by a eunuch behind a curtain once a week. Even the trays are polished bronze, etched with verses from Rumi and Adder, but the verses do not comfort. They mock. Try to be a prisoner in springtime, one tray reads. You laugh bitterly. Spring doesn't exist here. The flowers in the courtyard bloom on cue, but you only ever see their tops, just enough color to tease you, never enough to believe. One day, a new tray arrives. Instead of figs, it carries grapes. You stare at them for a long time, because grapes mean something. They mean change. In palace rumor, grapes mark the coming of news. Maybe a death, maybe a wedding, maybe ... freedom. You reach for one. Just one, and hesitate. Slowly, of course, carefully, with the reverence of someone receiving last rites. Because what if this isn't a gift? What if it's a test? The Kafes trains you to doubt everything, even kindness, especially kindness. The grapes sit untouched for hours before you finally eat them. They taste ... cold, and for a brief moment you remember what wind feels like, but only briefly. Because by nightfall, the tray is gone, and you are still here, still pacing, still reciting, still listening for footsteps that never come. This is the ritual. This is the cage. And it's not finished with you yet. You no longer count days. You count changes. One day, a servant's slippers make a different sound. Another, a corner of the room smells faintly of rosewater instead of dust. Once, a napkin arrives folded into a triangle instead of a square. You see when a food tray returns not quite empty. You learn the difference between an accidental silence and a planned one. And you begin to believe that the real danger in the Kafes isn't madness. These are the only shifts in your world now subtle, accidental, or deliberate. You don't know which. But your instincts begin to sharpen, like a blade honed by boredom. You notice when a eunuch looks too long at a doorway. You hear coughing once, then not again. A shadow appears in the courtyard glass. It doesn't move like a guard. You tell yourself it's a trick of light. On the fourth, he devours everything on the tray. The next morning, his voice is gone, not weak gone. He screams silently, mouth open, eyes bulging, but not a sound escapes. It's meaning. But someone designed this space to see what happens when power is denied oxygen. Meaning where there should be none. That in certain reigns, they served as listening chambers. That viziers and scribes tested poisons here. That the princes, some of them, were not only observed, that studied. You start to notice that one of the lamps flickers every third night, even though there's no wind. You don't believe it. There is a rumor among the other princes whispered only in glances and half-syllables, that the walls of the Kafes were used for more than containment. Somewhere, not always visible, not always present, but real. Watching, noting, testing. Sometimes you speak directly to them. Not out of madness, but out of respect. A controlled decay. One prince or cousin, perhaps, refuses to eat for 3 days. They call it the quieting. You see concubines move like ghosts, their heads bowed, lips pressed together as if they too know this corner of the palace is cursed. Just one. No one speaks of it again. Another makes you feel euphoric, almost lucid, as if the fog is lifted. Once, after eating saffron rice, you recite a full verse from a childhood poem you thought you'd forgotten. You write it on the wall with a burnt match. Historians still debate whether the Sultans personally approved such practices, or whether the bureaucracy beneath them simply evolved its own cruelty. You're living the result. You begin to suspect your food is not just food. One dish makes you forget entire mornings. The next day, it's gone. Not erased, removed, and the match is gone too. You've stopped pretending you're alone. You find yourself praying not to Allah, but to the walls, to the air, to anything that might respond. There are eyes here. If I'm your subject, you whisper to the ceiling, at least give me a name. No response. But the next morning, the tray comes with a new item. A date. Fresh. Plump. You don't touch it. You begin keeping watch through your lattice-screen-long stretches of motionless study. The harem gardens lie beyond, strangely silent. One night, you see one of them pause near your window. Just for a second. Her eyes flick upward. You lock gazes. And then she's gone. The next day, a servant arrives with your tray, and there's a folded scrap of silk under the bread. You unfold it. It's blank. But the message is clear. You are not forgotten. The paranoia blooms into obsession. You no longer eat without testing every bite. You wait by the door and press your ear to the marble for sounds that don't belong. There's a terrifying comfort in the fear. It feels like activity, like proof that something still matters, that you are not yet fully erased. You begin developing theories. What if the Kafes is not meant to contain madness, but to harvest it? What if your slow unraveling is the point? A test for resilience? A sieve for divinity? Some of your fellow captives have embraced this idea. One insists the cage is sacred, that the longer you endure, the closer you come to divine understanding. He performs ablutions obsessively, bows toward a different direction each day, and mutters phrases in 3 languages: Arabic, Greek, and a dialect no one recognizes. That outside the door lies not freedom, but non-existence. He stopped eating entirely last month, still alive, somehow. He hasn't blinked in 2 days. Another believes the Kafes is a false world, like Plato's cave. You try not to follow their example. One night, you dream of your brother's hand, reaching into your cell only to pull it back slowly, fingers dissolving like smoke. But you do start dreaming differently. Your dreams are clearer now, sharper. You see your mother's face. A garden of fig trees, a white horse with red eyes. You wake up sobbing. There's an old Ottoman superstition that dreams in captivity are reversed omens. A nightmare brings good fortune. A peaceful dream, however, foretells disaster. You begin wishing for the nightmares. There's another whisper that reaches your cell. This time, not a rumor, but a fact, a real one, barely veiled. Your brother is ill. The Sultan coughs blood. They say he sees ghosts. He calls out names of dead courtiers in his sleep. There are scribes preparing documents. The divan has grown quiet. And you? You're being evaluated. Someone has placed you back on the board. Not for execution, for succession. The cage has opened before for men like you. But those men rarely walked out whole. One emerged with a limp he never had before. Another had to be held upright during his coronation. Sultan Mustafa, I was one of them. Freed from the cage after years inside, he ruled briefly and began hiding under carpets, convinced Jing were after him. He was dethroned twice and returned to the cage willingly. You wonder, if the door opened tonight, would you step through? And if you did, what would step out with you? Because after so many years, the cage isn't just a place, it's a presence, and it might not let go. It's early. So early the light hasn't yet broken through the lattice. But you feel it before you see it, the change. Something in the air hums with unnatural calm, a stillness too intentional, like the palace is holding its breath. Then you hear it, a lock turning. This one is louder, thicker, final, the kind of sound that doors don't make unless they haven't moved in years. Not one of the quiet, polite clicks that signal a servant's arrival. You hear footsteps. Not soft slippers this time, but hard soles, boots, measured, deliberate, echoing where echoes don't usually live. Your door. You recognize him barely. His face is older, fuller, but the eyes are the same. He speaks now, breaking the spell of years. You sit up slowly, robes clinging to your skin from the night's sweat. They've come for you. The eunuch enters. The Sultan is dead. You knew this day would come. You prayed for it, feared it, imagined it. But when the moment arrives, it feels absurd, like being told you've just won a war you don't remember fighting. Each step out is a rebirth, if birth could feel this unnatural, this forced. You feel disconnected, like watching someone else inhabit your body. Too bright. You don't respond. You can't, because for a moment, those words don't feel real. Come, he says. You stand, legs trembling like a newborn fawn. The chamber around you feels smaller now, like it's being folded way behind you. You are washed like a child, dried like a relic. The hallway is longer than you remember, the light brighter. As you walk, servants bow. You hear murmurs of titles. P-I-H-A-I-Sh-A, God. Your Majesty. The words brush past you like feathers. They mean nothing. A drop dish sounds like an execution bell. Someone offers you water. You nearly slap it away, suspecting poison. And still the cage clings. You realize you don't know how to walk among people anymore. How to hold your hands. Where to look. You flinch at every sudden movement. This is your coronation, and you are terrified. They bring you to a small room first. A bath is drawn. Your hair is trimmed. Silks are laid before you regal, embroidered, shimmering. They speak to you as if you've never ruled a day in your life, and you haven't. But now, suddenly, the empire is yours. And you realize something chilling. You're not ready. No one would be. They hand you the seal of the empire. Heavy, cold. You don't feel pride. You feel grief. Because something inside you, something silent and innocent, died back in that golden cage. And no throne can resurrect it. There's a disturbing irony here. The cage was meant to prevent bloodshed, to stop royal murders and brutal succession wars. But by turning princes into phantoms, it birthed a different cruelty, a quiet, creeping, psychological horror. Whether madness at the helm is more dangerous than an empty grave. Historians still debate whether the Kafes created worse rulers than the blade. You may one day answer that question, but not today. Today, you're paraded through the palace. You see faces that watched your slow decay from afar, viziers who smiled at your confinement, scribes who took notes as your sanity curled like parchment in fire. Some avert their eyes now. Others smile too widely. None of them are friends. You finally reach the audience chamber. The throne sits beneath a vast dome, surrounded by tile mosaics and towering stained glass windows. It's breathtaking, holy, terrifying. They motion for you to ascend, and you do. One slow step at a time. Your hands rest on the lion-headed armrests. A ceremonial sword is placed across your lap. You're the Sultan now, but you don't feel alive. You feel like a relic moved from one room to another. Because if history is any guide, one day you will fall. A coup, a betrayal, an illness, a dream too strange to ignore. And you're not alone. Somewhere behind the tapestries, you imagine the cage watching silent, patient, waiting. And when that day comes, they won't kill you. They'll return you. The Kafes is always waiting. It doesn't end with a door opening. It ends when the silence feels like home.